Hello, I'm Donna Collins, Executive Director of the Ohio Arts Council. Welcome to the OAC's Arts Beacon of Light, Finding Hope in the New Normal. This project was inspired by our board member, Tina Houston. Through the Ohio Arts Beacon, we aim to give our artists a place to share, connect, and cope with the challenges presented in the world today. We hope to inspire you while giving artists a platform for connection, expression, and encouragement. So let's get started. Today, I am joined by comedian and actor Robert Post. Welcome, Robert.
Donna, hello. So happy to be here.
Robert, we're so happy to have you with us. Let me give our audience a Post overview, if you will. Robert is the creator of Post Comedy Theater, Post from the Road, and the program How to Survive Middle School, among many, many other things. He stuttered and studied at The Ohio State University, theater and dance, and then literally hit the road with a touring mime and improv troupe. Robert crafted his signature style during intensive workshops with Tony Montanaro, a legendary performer and teacher who ran Celebration Barn in South Paris, Maine. So now, over these many years, kind of 40-ish, right, Robert? Robert has become a fan favorite in Ohio and travels the world performing and changing lives. You can learn more about Robert at robertpost.org. Hey, Robert, from comedy to juggling to pure joy entertainment, I would add that one of the most influential programs you've developed is How to Survive Middle School. We'll talk about that a little later in the program, but let's start with how the magic started. Tell our audience the Robert Post story.
Well, as you can imagine, I was that kid that you really couldn't control. And, I know we're going to talk about How to Survive Middle School a little later down the road, but part of that was the fact that school was a nightmare for me. And I'm going to give this will sum it up. So my aunt, Gloria, who unfortunately suffered through Alzheimer's, this will give you the perfect description of what I was like as a child. So she had Alzheimer's and she wasn't recognizing anybody anymore. And I went to the house to say my final farewell to her, and my cousin, her daughter Donna, said, look, she's not going to recognize anybody anymore, so just accept that. I walked in, she looked over at me, and she said, well, here's trouble. And so after all this time, that sums up my childhood with my family. I was that kid that would watch the Ed Sullivan Show, not to just watch the Ed Sullivan Show, to dream that I would be that person that someday would be on the Ed Sullivan Show. So physical comedy, falling down from my bicycle on purpose, learning any skill that I could, and anything that had to do with a way to be funny and to learn how to be funny. That's what I kind of grew up dreaming, to be the next Jerry Lewis. So that's kind of the path that I followed. And I don't think that, it's interesting now that I've gotten older over the last, I think you said 40 years, it's been 42 years that I've been performing, and starting off so young at the age of 5 really helped. But I'll wait for the laughter on that. But yeah, so it was just that the idea of, I knew that I wanted to do something different. I didn't know how to pull that off. And then you mentioned Tony Montanaro, and that particular gentleman changed my life. So Tony became the teacher, father figure that I always dreamed of having. And I think that if you're an artist and you're lucky enough to find somebody, and I don't use the brilliant word very often, but if you're lucky enough to find somebody who's brilliant and can really help you and has that extraordinary gift of making you better, so that's kind of been the journey for me.
Robert, I could almost use those exact words about you for what you do for people through your shows and through your mentoring and through your one-on-one with people. So kudos to Tony, and thank you for being that person for so many of us.
Oh, thank you.
Sure. One of the questions on our minds this morning is about the COVID-19 crisis and how it's impacting artists.
Mhm.
Talk to us, talk to us about how an artist continues to create, perform, and stay engaged when we have limited access to in-person audiences or big performance venues, which you're very used to. And share with us any innovative ways you've been connecting with people, please.
Well, I'm going to take this briefly down a kind of a strange path here. In March, I was doing a show before all of this hit, and in the middle of the show, I kind of reached for this prop, and as I reached, I felt a in my back, and that led to a month and a half from early March until going into April of basically being, wow, I can walk from my bed to downstairs and that's it. And so it was really strange. I knew that this pandemic was happening, but I was far more concerned with, wow, what have I just done to myself? And I got through it. I'm feeling 100% fine again, and that's wonderful. But the first day that I felt strong enough to go to the store, it was such a shock to me. Like, people with masks and you had to stay 10 feet away from each other. I was like, I'd entered the end of the world. So that was interesting. And then tied on to all of that is that once I started feeling better, all the bookings that I had in March, April, and May are gone. South Carolina, New Mexico, Wisconsin, Minnesota. I had most of my bookings were going to happen in April and May, and either I lost them all or they were rescheduled. And so when you talk about what we do as artists, when you reschedule it, well, some of them rescheduled it for the fall. Nobody really knows what to do, so we're all trying to figure this out. And so we're still at that place that we're just trying to say, wow, what is the next step here? So I just started getting some emails from my agents saying that people now are moving from the fall to the spring with bookings. So it's a very challenging time. And that also goes to the booking conferences, which you know about. And people that don't know what a booking conference is, you have the big one at APAP in Manhattan, and then Arts Midwest moves around the Midwest. So it's happened here in Columbus. A lot of times it's in Minneapolis. This year was going to be in Omaha, Nebraska. That's now been, I think they're trying to figure it out, but I'm it's usually in the fall, so that's now looking not so great. So I've kept my sanity by my new love, which is what I've been doing for the last 30 years, which is filming my touring life. So I'm still taking lessons from my teacher for the camera, but this is the first time that I'm so lucky that Ben Bays is my editor from my Post from the Road video stuff. But now I'm taking all this time to really learn how to edit. So that's been kind of, editing is really hard. It's like to make one little move, you have to do 12 different things. And so I have thrown myself into editing. And so in a sense, it's been an extraordinarily creative learning time for me. And I'm thankful for that. I just wish that, as everybody does, I just wish we knew where it was taking us. But so in that way, it's been a real positive for me artistically.
That's wonderful. Let's build
Yeah.
on that a little bit and tell us, because you are worldly, I know that you do work not just in the US, but all places in the world. So give us your worldly view about how you are finding joy in the smallest, simplest things, and you're turning them into stories and programs. And you mentioned Post on the Road. That might be an idea to talk us through so people have a better understanding of how that all started.
One thing about being a performer is you have this horrible pressure of always having to create something new. It never leaves you. And when you write something, if you're fortunate enough that you've written something that's so good that it can play internationally, that's great, but it also adds this kind of horrible burden to you that, wow, I have to keep it at that level, and it's hard. So my whole life, especially in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, is I would tour with a camera, and the camera would be in my whatever hotel I was in. I'd either go in the bedroom I was in I don't know, I was trying to work out a suite or something, or I would go into some banquet room they would have, and I would film myself working on something new. And I don't remember the town, but I was in Oklahoma, and this was a long time ago, somewhere in the 80s, let's say the late 80s, and I can get, if I'm on the road for like 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, if I'm out there for that long, you kind of this is a strange thing to say, but I kind of forget who I am, and I can get not depressed, but I can get confused, like, wow, I'm in my own universe here. It's a strange place to be on the road because there's so much travel that when you perform, yeah, you live for the performance, but then you're kind of in a car traveling, and it's just this kind of gypsy transient life. Anyway, so Jackie said, Robert, why don't you take the camera and go outside and interview people? And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, just, you're so quick on your feet. Just pick up the camera and go outside and just interview people. Just talk to people. Just, what do you see? And I looked outside in this dusty Oklahoma town, and I'm like, no, what are you talking about? She said, Robert, pick up the camera and do what you do best. Complain. And then I said, my God, it's 110 degrees. There's nobody out there. Who am I going to? And I just went to this land. And she said, just like that. And that's actually exactly how it started.
For the last 30 years, I've been documenting my gypsy life on the road. Believe me, in 30 years, I have seen it all. This is not where you want to run out of gas. I really wanted to inform him that more guns, less lawyers was grammatically incorrect, and it should have been more guns, fewer lawyers. Anything you want to say to the great state of Ohio?
Hey, I love that city, that town. I'd love to go.
You mean that state? I'm in Turkey. I'm in Turkey. Did that sound Russian though? But before I came in here, I looked across the street and I saw that glass building. And I thought, oh, it's like an art installation. And I opened the door and it is a what?
It's a see-through bathroom.
I'm in the bathroom! That was so evil of me.
So the great thing about having the camera, the great thing about posting the road, is that I've taken what was a weakness, something that really bothered me, right? That you go out there and you do the show and then you travel 12 hours to the next town or whatever it is to do the show. Now I document, look for, go out of my way to find things that are interesting to me. And I don't care where it is. I don't care if it's 8-10 hours out of the way. I've had maybe 8 technical people that have traveled with me. Some people love that journey, and those are the people that I go with, and other people just want to get to the town, and that's it. So that's that constant sense of searching, being a people person. I like to talk to people. I like to learn things. I like to explore. I'm a risk taker, right? And so that continual journey feeds me like nothing I've ever experienced, even more so than me performing on the stage. I mean, when you perform on the stage and you do what I do, and I'm sure it's different for anybody that's listening, but every piece that I've created takes years. It takes a long time funny's hard. Funny is unpredictable. Like, you're out there and you're working on something. Let's say I've been in the studio for 3 months and wow, this is going to be really great. I can't wait to do it. You go out there and it falls flat. And you don't know why. Then you start to listen to the audience and they will inform you what they understand, what's working, what's interesting to them, what's funny. You have to really be brave enough and calm enough to listen to them.
Robert, I loved hearing you talk about those skills of listening to the audience, learning from that, letting them help you grow and prepare for the next version of whatever's been created. And I feel like that's the same for arts administrators. We're all listening to the audience, right? Understanding what our constituents need, hearing from them makes such a difference. I like that we can compare what you do to what arts administrators do at a very minute level that allows us to understand it's those we serve that are most important.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word minute. I think that is a relationship that you have as an artist with people that are administrators and arts councils that are doesn't with foundations. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm a very hard-headed person, and I used to think that, you know, you need to leave me alone, let me go to a studio and do my thing. I found that's a really hard path, right? I found that if I began to ask for, and this is this has been hard for me, if I began to ask for help and guidance and what do you think, my work started taking off. So I totally think it's a collaboration without any question. It took me a while to learn that.
I agree 100%. If I can brag a little bit about our board and our staff, when we listen to the field, the Arts Council gets better. So we're right with you.
As you know, How to Survive Middle School is something that you're very connected with, right? You get that show. You're not only an arts administrator person, but you're also have had many years of in education. You understand what I was going for with that. And at the very beginning, when I was thinking, wow, I mean, you know, you get in front of a middle school audience, you know, you get 600, 800 middle school kids out there. You say you have 800, you really have 1,600, because in each one of them, they're trying to figure out who they are. So you got 2 or 3 in each kid. And from the very beginning, you believed in what I was doing, and I'm forever grateful for that.
Well, it's easy to believe when you're reaching the kids who need you the most. So when I think about those students, especially those who are experiencing bullying, you experienced bullying, and
Right.
the students are profoundly impacted by the show. The first time I saw it live, of course, I'd seen some video portions of it as you prepared that were excellent, but to sit at the Lincoln Theater and to see the children react and to see teachers shushing them, and you sort of called them out and said, let them speak, let them talk, let them react. This is what this show is about. I cried. I was in the second to last row and cried throughout the whole thing, and I should have been laughing and joyful with you when the funny parts came along, but I was so moved by the kids. So tell our audience about the development of How to Survive Middle School and your thoughts and reactions to the students and teachers and principals, especially those who've been most moved by this work.
You know, this goes back to creativity, right? You have an idea for a show. And the very beginning of this idea started when I was teaching a workshop for middle school kids. And you know, they're middle school, right? I mean, so here I am teaching a workshop on movement, and middle school, you know, they're terrified of they don't understand, they can't move, they're trying to figure it out, they're so awkward. And I've done many of these workshops, and in the middle of this workshop, I just stopped and I said, you know, we're gonna do something different. We're gonna create a movie. And all the kids were like, you know, like look at me. And I said, we're gonna create a movie about middle school. And just happened that at this particular school, the superintendent of the school was watching the workshop, which was a very brazen thing of me to do, to completely make a U-turn in the middle of this workshop. And he said, well, what do you mean you're going to make a movie? You're going to create a video? And I said, yeah, I'm going to create a video, and it's going to be called, I had no idea in my head. Nothing. It's going to be called, very important what you call the show. And so that show is going to be called, you know, because it's so, and I'm just like hemming and hawing, and finally just came out of me. I said, it's going to be called How to Survive Middle School. And the superintendent said, oh my God, I love that idea. And that's where it took off. And it was just that one workshop. I have no idea where that idea came from. And then I put together the show. It's very difficult to do a show live, right? Like I'm performing and talking to the kids. And then you're kind of weaving in all these video interviews that I've done with middle school, high school kids, and then teachers and superintendents and principals and whoever else is in the videos. And I had to kind of figure this out, and I thought that I had, and I was touring the show and it was going very well and everybody really loved it. And then I performed in upstate New York, and I got a brutal email from this teacher. It was brutal. And my normal response, you know, I'm a performer. I've been critiqued, oh, thousands of times, you know, so I mean, that's just part of the journey. And at first I kind of blew it off, and you know, this was then I really I really connected with one thing she said in this email. She said, this show right now is great if you're an adult. And I thought, well, what is she talking about? You know, it's really powerful if you're a teacher or a parent and you're listening to this. How powerful is it for the kids? And I started to think that, wait a minute, you know, she's absolutely right, because I had written the show early on from my perspective. Yeah, I mean, growing up with learning disabilities is a nightmare. I don't know how many kids out there are really suffering in middle school. I don't know how many kids are up and down, and there's no way of knowing that. I had done so many interviews with kids that any of the material that was left over from the interviews, right, anything that the kids had said, that then became the script. So I'm really saying everything that I'm saying is their words. And as soon as I changed it, as soon as I went down that path, everything came from them, unless it's me telling a personal story about myself, and the show took off. And so sometimes you have to take that step back and listen to what people are saying. And I wrote her a long email, you know, profusely thanking her and saying that was the greatest critique I ever had. So that idea of really trying to connect with the world of a kid, and this is hard. What I'm going to say right now is really hard. I don't know how many kids have come up to me, and you can always tell the show is done. Well, either if I'm in a school, it's easier for them, but a lot of times I'm on a stage in a theater, right? And you can see them at the corner of my eye. They're asking the teacher if it's okay if they come up to me, and they kind of slowly work their way over to me. They always say the same thing. Did you feel invisible when you were in school? Wow. Yeah. Yes, I did.
Yeah, Robert, that's why this program is so important. And, you know, I witnessed that myself, watching those young people agree, shake their heads yes. The very quiet children,
Right.
by the middle of the show, were applauding and agreeing. And so it was just as it should have been. The message was delivered and heard, and they didn't seem to feel as alone. So thank you for developing this show and continuing to grow it into a high school portion of the program too. Do you want to talk a little about that?
I've had many parents, teachers, principals, whoever, they love the fact the last video in the show is high school students reflecting back on middle school. So you're going to make it through this. Yes, this is a really tough time for some of you. And then that whole idea that you get to be much more independent by the time you get to high school. So you're not all lumped together constantly in the same class, going to class to class to class. So, but I have had people that want me to do a show called about high school, but good Lord, I mean, I'm already locked into middle school, and I like middle school because it's kind of the final frontier. I think it's that last age group that you can really affect them. You know, they'll listen to you, and I think by the time they get to high school, they're kind of on their own journey, and they'll listen, especially if it's, you know, a mom, dad, grandma, whatever. But you know, this tall guy coming in and rambling, you know, they got their own thing going on. But I do touch on that with obviously at the end of the show with the high school kids reflecting back.
You know, I don't want to give away too much of your show, but I was really touched by the high school bully who said, hey, I did this to people. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I've changed. And so that gives me so much hope, right? So kids who can see themselves through this show and change. So thank you for that. Oh gosh, we better move on or I'm just gonna start crying. And we don't wanna have that.
No.
Thank you. As we all know, Robert, many artists are delivering their shows virtually, some of them making no money, but truly delivering shows because they're trying to be helpful and caring and connect with people, because that's what artists do so well. I've heard from so many artists about how they miss being with the live audience, which I've heard you talk a little bit today. And I've also heard from numerous audience members who can't wait to buy tickets and concert tickets and theater tickets, saying, I'll never complain about the price of a ticket again. Well, that's music to our ears. So, right? Tell us about what it means to you to be with an audience, because you've done both live performance and television productions. How does the world seem to you from those vantage points?
Well, I don't think anything can top being in front of an audience that really gets what you're doing, whether it's the How to Survive Middle School or post comedy theater. There's such it's not so much that it's just such a live experience. I've learned so much about myself as a person in being in front of an audience, because when you travel, and let's say you're doing 18 shows in 18 different towns, right? Every place is different. They don't know that you just were in Des Moines, Iowa, and you just ripped the theater down, right? They don't know. So you're starting fresh, and you have this kind of like, you're feeling each other out. So what I do is that I always start with like a 5-minute thing in which I'm just talking about the town, talking about things that I've seen, talking about people, just really, connecting with the audience that's there. That I really miss. I really miss that. And oddly enough, this is going to sound strange. I miss the fear. I miss that you're trying to you're trying to get this thing going, and it's that first 10, 15 minutes of how do I make this work? It's really working now. That dance you do with an audience.
So we've spent most of our time talking about you as an actor and a producer. And I'd also love to know what you're thinking about as we look to the future, as members of the human race, as we go through this pandemic, and what it looks like from your vantage point going forward.
In How to Survive Middle School, now I end the show with something which is what I feel when I go out in the world now and try to relate to people that don't agree with me on what's happening with this country. I'll say to the kids, look, I don't know how many of you are being bullied. I don't know how many of you are experiencing middle school as a trauma like I did, that it was really rough for you. But I do know the kids that aren't. If you're not, you know the kids that are. So why don't you just find a moment? Don't make a big deal of this. Don't make it public. Just find a private moment and ask them, hey, you doing okay? You doing all right? Anything I can do for you? Just to check in with people, because for some reason that's being left out the door, and that's not the way I see the world at all.
Robert, that's excellent advice for all of us, middle schoolers, high schoolers, adults, wannabe adults, checking in privately, having those small conversations without a purpose other than care and love and respect. So thank you for that. As we begin to wrap up our time, I would be remiss if I did not ask you about your wonderful life partner, Jackie. How are the two of you doing? You're at home all the time, I assume, together, and it must be a barrel of laughs or total separation. Or is it somewhere in between?
Oh, I think Jackie would just say being married to me is nothing but a barrel of laughs, a big barrel of laughs. So Jackie's still working. So Jackie is going in and she's creating all these programs that she's doing online, and then she's delivering art supplies to kids. Jackie's on her Jackie mission, right? And so she's still working, and I could wax poetic about the great things that Jackie has done, and how she really goes into the community and makes things happen. I'm kind of on the periphery of that. I'd rather just be the creative person, but Jackie really goes in and she's all about helping people and gently pushing people to kind of reach their, their full potential. So yeah, and then now I've become, since I'm just here, I'm become the cook. So I'm the person that's doing all the cooking. I'm just about to paint our bedroom, and I'm just kind of, I've never been a person, I mean, neither of us have been the kind of people that just sit around and don't do anything. We're like full bore no matter what's going on. And so I'm doing the editing, I'm doing the cooking, I'm doing the painting. Jackie's in the garden when she's home, but she's still working full time with Transit Arts and continuing to do her amazing work.
Please give our regards to Jackie and thank her for her good work with Transit Arts and Central Community House and the folks in Columbus and Central Ohio, quite frankly, that she has been helping and holding up. And I know that she would say they're helping and holding her up just as much. So thank her for her good work. Folks, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I think we got to wrap up. So thank you, Robert, for being with us today. You are a beacon of light, and together we are finding hope in the new normal. To our audience, if you want to know more about Robert, visit his website at robertpost.org. And for more inspiration and stories from our Arts Beacon of Light Finding Hope in the New Normal project, we welcome you to visit us at the Ohio Arts Council. You can also follow the OAC's Arts Beacon on Instagram at Ohio Arts Beacon. We hope you will submit your stories and share your light with the world through all of us at the OAC and this special project. Until next time, let's all find hope in the new normal. And remember, the arts in Ohio are better when we work together.